Alright, welcome back to the Neurobrain channel. Today I am going to test the focuser on this scope. And I'm going to do some things in this test that you will see on no other astrophotography channels, guaranteed. Now, originally I was going to put this test into my final review for this scope. However, the information started getting so extravagant and deep because I'm a machinist and I like getting into this kind of stuff that I decided to make it a separate video. And there's going to be some very different terminology in here that a lot of you probably have never heard before, even if you've been in astrophotography for a long time. So let me explain to you a few terms first before we delve into this. Now, the first topic at hand is going to be backlash. Okay, now this is a rack and pinion style focuser. There are two different styles of focusers out there. There is your Crayford style focuser and then your rack and pinion. Now, Crayford style focusers have been kind of favored by visual astronomers for a very long time because they have zero backlash. Now, okay, what does all this mean? Okay, so what I have here, I actually have a Crayford style focuser that I brought out. This is my GSO focuser on my 120 Acromat. And it's a Crayford style focuser. And a Crayford style focuser, the way this one operates at least, is it has a linear rail inside of it, which is kind of like this one. This is a lot more expensive. But anyways, what there is the shaft to the focusing knob is like a rod, okay? And it's actually pushed into this linear rail. And as you turn that rod, it moves the linear rail, which is what the focuser is attached to, in and out. Now, because you have metal to metal contact, because it's friction based, you have absolutely no slippage when you change directions, okay? And so you have no backlash with these styles of focusers. Now, these styles of focusers, however, are kind of finicky. You've got to tune them. You've got to get the amount of pressure that this rod is pressed into this here linear rail just right, or it can slip on you, which could be really disastrous on a night with astrophotography, which is probably one of the reasons why we start seeing rack and pinion style focusers like this one showing up more and more, at least for scopes for astrophotography. Now, to check whether or not yours has a rack and pinion style focuser, it's pretty easy. On the bottom half, when the thing is exposed a little bit or racked back a little bit, you will see that the track down here, instead of being smooth like we had here on the Crayford focuser, it has teeth, okay? And it is those teeth that where the backlash starts, because with teeth, there always has to be one side of the tooth that is free. If you have both sides engaged, well, wear will start to happen and a lot of friction, and it will basically kind of destroy itself. So you have to have some spacing in there. You can get it really close, and I'll show you an example here in my machine shop. And actually, let's head over to the machine shop now. All right, so this is one of my lathes, and this is actually the first lathe I ever bought. It's about a $8,000 machine, and it's not the best quality. And it has some backlash in it. And so I'm going to put a dial indicator on here, and I'm going to illustrate to you backlash on two axes here that we can really kind of illustrate nicely using dial indicators. So hopefully you can see the dial here and then the dial, of course, on the gauge. Now I'm going to basically start turning it in one direction. As you can see, this guy's moving to indicate that the slide is in fact moving. Now I'm going to change direction, and I'm going to go back the other way. As you can see, I've started moving this, and that dial hasn't moved yet. I'm going to keep going, and there we go, we see it start to move. And this guy, it's about 8 thousandths worth of backlash, and yeah, I've tried tuning this thing and kind of tightening it up, making it as close as I can, but that's about as good as I can get it, because, you know, this isn't the best quality piece of equipment. All right, now to compare the difference here, this machine here, this is about a $14,000 to $16,000 machine, depending on how you get it configured. And if I had done the same test on this guy, we would have seen almost no detectable backlash. There's about a thousandth in it that I can measure with my gauges and so forth. But yeah, that's kind of an illustration of, you know, getting, you know, a higher quality piece of equipment. You can get it very close to having no backlash whatsoever, but you can never get rid of it completely, no matter how good a machine you buy. And this right here is a counterweight that I made on this guy. This is actually what I use this lathe for, is making big counterweights. All right, so what I have here, this is a large granite surface plate or surface block. It's for indicating things and measuring parts to make sure that they're very precise. Of course, it's leveled and everything, because in fact leveling will actually indicate it will actually influence your indicators. We're dealing with very precise increments here. As a matter of fact, the one dial that I'm going to put on here, if I walk to the other side of the table, it will change the reading because of the magnetism of my body. Okay, the electricity that my heart is actually used to pump with is actually going to affect that indicator that much. It will show up. So yeah, fun stuff that we get to do as machinists. All right. Now, I have disengaged my autofocuser, and we're going to put the dial indicator on here, and also some weight on the scope just to make sure it doesn't move. And then we're going to basically kind of try to see if we can detect how much backlash there is in this focuser. All right, so here's our setup. I've got this is a 1/2 thousandths Brown sharp indicator, and then I've got a 40-pound counterweight sitting on top of the scope just to make sure it doesn't move anywhere. So let's give this a go. So I'm going to start turning in one direction. I'm going to start going back the other direction. And there's almost no perceptible backlash. There's about, let's see here. There's a tad bit of stiction, which is basically a delay when it starts, but it actually does start to move. It just kind of has to kind of like gear up, so to speak. I'd say there's only about a 1/2 thousandth of backlash in that, which that's pretty incredible, to me at least. All right, so the last thing that I want to test here is basically to see if there's any sag in the focuser. In other words, if we put a weight and push on the focuser in one direction, see if there's actually any movement in it relative to the body of the scope. And in order to do that, I'm going to put some more counterweights around the scope to kind of make sure that the body doesn't move. And then I'm going to take a scale puller basically, and I'm going to put a couple pounds on it, and we'll see if the indicator moves at all. And we're going to do that both directions, up and down, so that we can see if there's any sag in the focuser. You know, and this is more of a critical thing for us as astrophotographers. Visual photographers, this won't be as interesting. All right, now to test this, to make sure that my setup didn't move, we first set the indicator here up on the actual tube of the scope itself. And I'm actually going to put like a couple of pounds of pull on it here. And you can see the dial, it's pretty much not moving, but it's moving about 4/10,000ths of an inch. And that 4/10,000ths of an inch is probably the actual tube bending. Very small amount. So now let's switch it over to the focuser. And we're gonna get a little closer too. All right, so I've zeroed out the dial for us. You can see right there. And my goal here is I'm gonna put 2 pounds of pressure on this thing in one direction, okay? And we'll see how much it flexes. And now we're gonna switch to the other side and do the same thing. All right, here we are on the opposite side. So once again, 2 pounds of pressure. So that was about 4/1000ths total that it moved. And as you can see, it actually didn't go all the way back to zero. It kind of stayed a little bit where it was by about a 1/2 thousandth of an inch. Okay, by the way, let me give you a little perspective of like these dimensions and these sizes, okay? A human hair is about 4/1000ths thick on average. So that's the kind of increments here we're dealing with. All right, so now we're gonna put this in here. We're gonna pull up 2 pounds. And that time we saw a little bit less movement. That was only about 3/1000ths of movement. And as you can see, once again, it didn't quite return to zero. It's, let's see here, about 3/4 of a thousandth that came up and stayed. Now our final test here, I'm actually just going to take something that weighs 2 pounds and I'm going to put it on the camera. But this one's actually going to probably surprise you a little bit. As you can see, there's basically no movement, and that's because the focuser is probably already in an engaged spot. I mean, that moved about 1/2 thousandth. All right, so there you go. Now, this is the first time I've ever done a video like this, and of course, I've never seen anybody else on any other astrophotography channels do tests like this. And Yeah, I kind like these kind of flexures that we see in the focuser. I don't know if that's great or bad. You know, I have to test other ones out there, but if you found this interesting, you know, give me a thumbs up and a like, and comment. Let me know if you'd like to see more of this. Maybe I will start testing some of my other scopes. This is kind of an involved process. It takes a little while to do, okay? But I have the equipment to do this, you know, like a lot, the granite surface plate that I have and the dial indicators that I have, these are pretty expensive tools, and I have them already, and so I can kind of do these kind of tests and kind of donate this information to the community of astrophotography or astronomy in general, okay, for your viewing pleasure. So let me know if you like it, and share it with other people if you thought this was kind of interesting, because this is, like I said, this is something you won't see anywhere else.